Just like President Reagan used to say, trust but verify. Trust what's being done, but verify that what they're doing is correct. So therefore, that's what TaxWatch was for me.
I became involved with Florida TaxWatch because of Publix, and Winn-Dixie people and some great legislators got together and formed Florida TaxWatch many years ago, 40 years ago. Mark Hollis was very involved with that formation, and then when he became president of Publix, then I sort of took over involvement with TaxWatch for Publix, and it's been a great experience.
Florida TaxWatch was built on the shoulders of giants. These giants were business leaders of the day. They were the civic leaders of the Florida Senate and legislature. They wanted an organization that was independent of trade groups, business groups, but a group that would be able to do research and use that research from the business community to help build a stronger, better, more effective Florida. They saw Florida as an adolescent state, and the whole idea was to make sure that businesses not only came to the legislature to fight tax increases on them, but would spend some time in an organized fashion to show how they could spend the tax dollars more effectively. Because it's not just the government's money, it's the taxpayers' money. And the business community has the most at stake at doing this well. And they have a lot of expertise and could bring that to the table. And so Phil Lewis was incoming president of the Senate when there was a proposal to raise taxes. He rebuked that. He prompted Mark Hollis of Public Supermarkets and Wayne Davis of Winn-Dixie. He rung Mark's bell, if you will, and said, look, spend more time and effort to get the business community to show us how we can spend that money smarter, better, rather than just come to fight against tax increases or to get tax advantages.
It's a great organization, probably one of the first times that Dixie and Publix had ever agreed on anything, and they agreed to form this great organization that exists today.
Florida TaxWatch was kind of founded as the eyes and ears of the taxpayers of Florida, working with the legislature, but also holding the legislature accountable, holding the governor accountable, all about focusing on what we can do to make Florida better. It just cares about making sure that we serve the people of Florida, the long-term interests, in understanding the demographics, that Florida can be the best it can be. And that is a contributing factor to why Florida has some of the best fiscal policies, fiscal practices, than any other state, and Florida TaxWatch has been an integral part of making that a reality.
We are so fortunate in Florida to have TaxWatch. No other state has an organization like it, and I know in the 40 years since TaxWatch has been founded that billions of dollars have been saved for the taxpayer because of its good work. But TaxWatch has a tremendous staff that does fantastic research, deep dives on policy issues, and then takes that research and turns it into policy initiatives that legislators and governors and other cabinet members take hold of and turn into actual law.
I was working at the time for Senator Ken Plant, and then he and several other people had gotten together and decided to start this group called the Citizens Council for Budget Research. And then there was me and our executive director, and then one other person, and then Dominic came along, they hired him, but it was very small and very quiet.
One other thing that was changed is you would call somebody and say you're from TaxWatch, and it would kind of just get quiet on the other end, you know. It's like, ooh, I thought we were out to get them.
Yeah, well, we finally had to get rid of Citizens Council for Budget Research because that was just too much to say. So we came up with the Florida TaxWatch, which finally people understand.
My first experience with Florida TaxWatch in the news media, quite frankly, was after the 1980 session when this list was provided and all these turkeys had been listed there. So I said, thank God he's not doing that for local government, that he's sticking to the state government. I have to say that's probably how I first got my attention on a statewide basis, because the media gave it a great play back then. Therefore, you almost had to be blind not to see it because it was everywhere.
We even at one point shared a building with the Retail Federation and Associated Industries.
Right.
And they bought a printing press, and we actually printed some of our reports.
We printed our own reports, and we bound them, and we took them where they needed to go. We did everything.
Yeah,
No computers.
no, certainly no
Typewriters.
computers. We had typewriters and one word processor, and Babs did everything. She did all the inputting of the reports. She made all the edits, and at that point, we had a pretty thorough editing process, and we would go through multiple changes. I remember whenever there'd be a new report, Dave Davis would buy her a jar of Advil.
In 1992, when I was a freshman legislator, me and 3 other freshman legislators, we actually decided to file the first ever Republican legislative budget. It was called the priority budget. And of course, the Democratic leadership was shocked. Sure enough, TaxWatch comes along as an independent organization and actually goes through and describes the merits of a lot of the proposals that me and these young rabble-rousing troublemakers had proposed. The Florida budget of today looks a lot more like the one we proposed that was considered radical. But we wouldn't have been able to keep up that fight if it hadn't been for the credibility of an organization like TaxWatch saying we need to take a look at new ways and better ways and more cost-efficient ways of running Florida government.
When you think about TaxWatch in the Florida Chamber, TaxWatch is only about a block away from the Florida Chamber. And so over the years, we've been involved in dozens of initiatives together. And I think when you think about what we're trying to accomplish, we're trying to grow Florida from the 17th largest economy in the world to the 10th largest economy in the world. We're soon going to be a $100 billion state budget. And we look to TaxWatch to look through that budget and to tell us what should the priorities be, how can government work more like a business. And that's one of the most important things TaxWatch does.
My first session in 1999, when Jeb was just elected governor and Tony Jennings was the president of the Senate, for the first time in the history of Florida, we had 3 Republicans in the top 3 jobs, political jobs. We put together a very, very robust tax policy and tax cuts that I think everybody kind of got behind, including TaxWatch, and Dominic was a big part of that. I think at that time it was the largest single tax cut in the history of Florida, and I was very proud of that because we were giving money back to businesses, back to the consumers in the state of Florida, and I think it was an indication that we're on the right track, and certainly TaxWatch had a big part of that strategy.
TaxWatch's influence on the intangible tax, doing away with intangible tax, was a very big thing. It was a silly tax to have in the first place, and TaxWatch's influence made that happen. And that's one of the things I'm happiest about.
And I remember one of the biggest things that everybody was so excited about was when the Miami Herald said their big quote of the day was, "Heed TaxWatch." That was really cool.
Yeah, we started getting more positive
Good press,
and I think people started realizing, and then we would do things like the what were at that time the Davis Productivity Awards, and I think that also helped to kind of change the perception of TaxWatch, and realize that we wanted to support state employees by acknowledging the ones that were doing a great job, and those kind of things built our reputation, and it just went from there. Recently, something that was one of the highlights, I think, of TaxWatch is the Principal Leadership Awards. To see those presentations, to see how much it means to them, both the principals and the schools that they work for, has really been a great experience and a great thing.
I don't know how you can survive if you don't make a difference. Our whole role is to help make Florida better. That's kind of what we were founded on, and I think we've taken that level and kind of enhanced it. That's our job. And I think we'll take great pride in not only presenting good quality research, but research that makes the well-being of Floridians better and more impactful. You've got to provide the independence and have the backbone to do it, and find someone that you have enough confidence in that could lead the organization and through those nuanced decision making.
TaxWatch also gets involved in issues, important issues. We cover a broad range of things that we do within our organization, even healthcare. And recently we were talking about the dearth of nurses and also the need for telehealth. And TaxWatch has taken a very proactive role in those issues, and that have been very helpful to us as an organization.
I
think TaxWatch has always been about accountability in government, and I think as we look at what we're doing in higher education over the last 5-6 years now, we have had a whole transition moving from measuring enrollment to thinking about outcomes, retention, graduation. Do your students get a degree and then get a job? It's that kind of accountability mantra that I think TaxWatch probably resonates with all of us when we go and think about how we can be accountable to the citizens of our state.
TaxWatch research really is set up to really address the needs that this state is going to need increasingly more and more. First of all, the fact that we are a research-based organization that really looks at data in a strong way. And that is becoming the driving force across every industry, certainly in this state. Whether it's artificial intelligence, whether it's big data, whether it's cognitive computing, you can pick the term. They're all elements that TaxWatch is uniquely positioned to embrace and put into play as we're looking at the tough challenges that are facing this state over the next 5, 10, 15 years.
From my time in state government, both in the Attorney General's office and the Governor's office, I came to learn how important TaxWatch is to advocate for the people of Florida. It's there every day, fighting to make sure that the taxpayer is treated well by the government, that the money that taxpayers have to send to Tallahassee is spent efficiently and effectively. There are a lot of other good interest groups in Tallahassee, but there's none like TaxWatch. There's no other group that focuses specifically on protecting the interest of taxpayers.
You know, the reason I really got involved, Dominic is sort of like this silverback gorilla. He's just always there. At first you try to ignore him, then he's poking. He's trying to get the whole troop to go in a direction. After a while, you can't ignore it any longer, and you just have to get involved, or else he won't stop.
People like Phil Lewis, who I adored. He was just a wonderful man. And Ken Plant and J.E. Davis was very interesting. And all these people in the very beginning, they're what really made it. It's what made the difference.
Babs was my favorite thing. She was like my mother when I first started working.
I keep telling Dominic I raised him.
She took care of me. She raised me. Made sure I was okay up here in Tallahassee.
Yeah.
I hope my legacy will continue, that TaxWatch is here to serve the long-term interests of Floridians throughout. That it's not going to yield to political pressures, economic pressures, or untoward influence. That it's going to be courageous. That it'll be good. As often said, I don't want the perfect to be the enemy of the good. And we've heard that a lot. But most importantly, you're dedicated to do the right thing and do it well. And that's really the legacy. And do it in spite of the challenges ahead, but also make sure you're relevant. I think the most important thing that I worry about every day, I don't worry about our independence. The biggest thing I worry about is how can Florida TaxWatch be relevant, impactful, and valuable today and tomorrow.
The state is changing rapidly, but so is TaxWatch. Its resiliency, the quality of the people that it brings on board, and the dedication and support and creativity of its volunteer leadership is what makes the day.
I'll never forget when I ran into Dominic and he had this beard. And not only did he have this beard, but it was really gray. And it's been shocking to me that he's kept it all this time. So that's probably one of the bigger surprises.